Hello, YouTube. I read Think and Grow Rich, so you don't have to. And don't imagine that this was not a labor of love. This was a very difficult book to get through, painful to read, actually, and I will try to summarize it as honestly and as in a dignified manner as I can, difficult though that may be. I do have a warning, is that sources will be cited, and I will place them in the description section below this video. Sources are key. Sources are rarely cited in our space, but they should be. I'm not really sure what the expression "do your own research" means, but citing sources is probably the minimum, the very least that one should do when one makes assertions that are not their own. This is the other warning. This is a a book. It's a book is a device, generally small enough to hold in the hand. It contains a bunch of paper that is joined together at one end, and there's generally a cover, which is either soft or hard. I made the mistake of buying the hardcover version of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This is the 2015 edition put out by Chartwell. Much of this video is going to be taken up with background, which is essential for understanding its author and the ideas contained in his book. Oliver Napoleon Hill, pictured here, was born in 1883 in Pound, Virginia, and he died in 1970, having lived quite a long time in Greenville, South Carolina. In his early life, he briefly attended law school, but he dropped out because of inability to pay tuition. And again, the sources for this information are going to be cited in the section below. Nevertheless, Hill is reported to have referred to himself as an attorney of law for the rest of his life, although he never practiced law. Now, in 1907, 1908, he presided over a failed lumber company which was shut down under a cloud. And in 1908, he supposedly had a meeting with Andrew Carnegie. And I am leaving out much detail and trying to be as charitable to this gentleman as I can, but I do want to make a digression and talk about the Andrew Carnegie story. This is Andrew Carnegie here on the right. He is best known for having founded U.S. Steel, and because of his philanthropy in the final several years of his life, he is reported to have given away $350 million. Now, in this supposed meeting with Hill in 1908, there is a transcript made by Hill of about 300 pages detailing the conversation between the two of them, which I understand is hysterical to read because it points to how implausible, in fact impossible, that this conversation in fact ever took place. The biographer of Andrew Carnegie, David Nassau, stated that he says there is no evidence that any such meeting took place. So moving on chronologically, in 1909, Hill founded the Automobile College of Washington, which involved students so-called building cars for free for another company which went bust in 1912. And then the Automobile College mutated into a proto-MLM, which is interesting. It doesn't have the same structure as what would emerge in the 50s with the progenitor of Amway. But this too closed amid a fraud charges. Now, in 1915, Hill founded the George Washington Institute for Advertising, which also closed in 1918 amid fraud charges. And then in 1919, he launched two magazines, both of which were closed amid fraud and money laundering charges. Folks, I have left out a lot. This is but the half of what Hill is alleged to have done during his life. And I'm purposefully leaving out all of the shenanigans he was engaged in after the publication of the book, which this video is about. Suffice to say that this is just a foretaste, just a hint of the character of Napoleon Hill. Let's move on a little bit. 1918, 1919. Hill claimed to have spoken personally with Woodrow Wilson and engineered the armistice that ended World War I. However, Wilson's presidency and especially the circumstances surrounding the end of the war in Europe is very well documented, and there is no evidence whatsoever to suggest that Hill and Wilson had any interaction at all, let alone one-on-one counsel in the White House. So let's move on to Hill, the writer. In 1925, he wrote a book called The Law of Success. In 1930, he authored The Magic Ladder of Success. And then finally, 1937, Think and Grow Rich. Now, all three of these books, especially the last, occurred in a cultural context. And I'm going to digress briefly and talk about that cultural context, which is the New Thought movement, which is generally associated with this man on the right, Phineas Quimby, who died in 1866. Famously, one of Quimby's students was Mary Baker Eddy, who, as many of you know, is the founder of the Church of Christ Scientist, or the Christian Scientists. The tenets of the New Thought movement as a religious movement essentially state that healing comes from the mind, but that's a much underdigested version of it. And the way that it mutated is really the focus of this discussion today. So that finally brings us to Think and Grow Rich, which can be really summarized in this statement. As long as you can influence using only your mind, why not become stinking, filthy rich in the process? And that's a quote from Matt Novak, who wrote a summary of Hill's life, and it's going to be sourced below. Now, I am going to briefly summarize all of the chapters of the book. Please keep in mind, for those who wish to come at me with defenses of this book, that the chapter numbers here are out of order. Chapter 1 is, in fact, his introduction. There is no introduction and then chapter 1. Chapter 1 is his introduction. So chapter 2 is actually chapter 1 that I'm going to talk about next is actually chapter 2, and so on. Don't come at me, please. Chapter 1 is called Desire, which essentially says, if you want it badly enough, you will get it. There's a video that I created about a spoof that the creators of Family Guy put out as a fun Christmas present a few years back, which was a hardcover version of Brian the dog, his self-help book called Wish It, Want It, Do It. And I should probably put this up at this site. If you want it badly enough, you will get it, is basically what he says. Hill is in this chapter where he claims that his deaf son gained the ability to hear through the sheer power of will. I'll just leave that there. Chapter 2 is called Faith. Basically, abandon reason. Chapter 3, autosuggestion, summarized as follows: both poverty and riches are the offspring of thought, and the emphasis is in the original. Chapter 4, specialized knowledge. Stuck in the very close to the beginning of this book is what I would suggest is really the only decent advice in the whole book, which is that it is worth your while to pay to acquire specialized knowledge. I don't know what to say. I agree. Chapter 5, imagination, just a rehash of previous chapters. Chapter 6, organized planning, very cleverly named. What is it, as opposed to disorganized planning? Maybe the expression made more sense in 1937. I don't know. Essentially, this is the longest chapter in the book. It is a font of poor advice that is used by MLMs in this very year of our Lord 2024. For example, surround yourself with like-minded people, channel all your energy into the business, etc. Chapter 7, decision. In other words, don't procrastinate. Jump right in. Don't think about it. Just go ahead and do it. Where have we heard that before, folks? Chapter 8, persistence. If you thought that the theme of Chapter 8 would be never quit, you would be wrong. It's actually a rehash of everything that precedes in the previous 8 chapters and the introduction. Okay, power of the master mind. It wasn't called mastermind then, it was master mind. Join a gang. Surround yourself with a crew. I hear MLM team leaders making the same claim even today, probably drawn directly from Think and Grow Rich and or the clones that followed it. Chapter 10, the mystery of sex transmutation, or why Think and Grow Rich is still a bestseller. You know, largely the book did draw upon books that preceded it, such as a Man Thinketh and other titles, but it tossed in a little bit of sex and became an international bestseller, particularly in the context of the Depression. What the chapter says essentially is channel your sexual desire into business success. That would have been advice that Napoleon Hill would have been wise to take, but he didn't. Again, I've told you I've kept all of the sordid details out, but the man could not keep it in his, as it were, pants. Chapter 11, the subconscious mind. In other words, toxic positivity is good. Chapter 12, the brain. Mental telepathy is a thing. Kid you not. The sixth sense, not I see dead people, but faith over fear. Have it. More rehash of everything that preceded. And the final chapter, how to outwit the 6 ghosts of fear, how to have faith over fear, basically a rehash of everything that preceded it. This book is not the really the very source of all of the nonsense that is used to prop up the MLM industry, but it is one of them. In my experience, when discussing the evolution of ideas or the evolution of anything, one principle that holds is if you think you have found the first trait, the first evidence of an idea or a body part or what have you, probably it is a lot older. It is certainly incorrect to date the beginning of the personal development so-called literature with Think and Grow Rich. That probably properly belongs with As a Man Thinketh, or even back to the writings of Phineas Quimby or before. But this is a useful place to start. Read this book and you hear its echoes down to this very day, and that's quite an achievement for a man who was essentially a failure in life. Your knowledge, experience, and your thoughts, your own thoughts, are way too valuable to waste in an MLM. That's all I've got. I'll see you in the next episode.